Hello everyone, and welcome back to another one of my Great Hunt videos where I read a chapter and then talk about it with you. I've actually finished the whole book, and on top of that I am up to chapter 50 in The Dragon Reborn, and so I've only got like 6 or 7 chapters left, and I'm super excited to finish this because I'm really loving it, but it's just taken me a little while to find the time. But anyway, that doesn't matter because I'm not starting on the Dragon Reborn videos until the start of, what month is it now? September, so in October. So I'm going to take a week off next week, just giving you a heads up. But this week, today and on Friday, I'm going to be finishing off the Great Hunt. So this is the penultimate video in this Great Hunt series, and I'm going to be talking about chapter 39 to 44, my thoughts, my feelings, my reactions, my experience of reading this wonderful book. So I'm going to get started with chapter 39, Flight from the White Tower. Leandrin's last sentence feels so ominous, like she's delivering them to a trap. So I wonder if she is. They left so easily, but I feel like Elsie, the farm girl, the farm girl, could remember seeing them if someone asks her later. So that's a little bit of an issue. They probably should have, no, they couldn't really do anything to prevent that, but it could prove to be problematic. I am curious about the role of Elsie in the bigger picture, because she has come back. So that's intriguing. It was an incredibly tense but uneventful journey through the ways, which I was surprised by, given the experience that the other group have had with the ways. It has to be building to something though. They couldn't have had this uneventful trip through the ways and then have nothing happen when they get through. So I'm expecting something pretty soon. The fact that they can access the ways though, it suggests the Black Wind was really following Rand or connected to Rand in some way, and given that sort of idea of the taint, I'd say that there's some connection there, which maybe will become clear, but maybe it'll just stay that mystery of there's connection there, but who knows what it is like. But okay, so will the girls arrive at Tom and Head before the boys? The timeline's a little bit obscure given the time jump. So I'm guessing that given this way, they're going to arrive quite a bit before the rest of the group. So Rand and Verin and that group arrive. And that will be interesting, I think, to sort of see what happens there. What do they turn around and go back? They won't do that. Will they go looking for them? Oh, I don't know. It'll be interesting. I love how in this chapter they all keep cursing Rand. Although if Leandrin doesn't suspect who he is already, I'd say she's had a few hints that he's the one they're worried about. During the course of this, they are more worried about Rand than they are about Mat and Perrin, and that probably gives Leandrin all the information she needs about who is the biggest, or potentially biggest issue if they're only looking for the Dragon Reborn. That is a bit of a dead giveaway on the girls' behalf, and on that I'm probably curious a little bit about what Elayne knows and what Elaine's guessing, but that'll come out at some point. Egwene's quote I wrote down, Egwene's quote is everything. I absolutely love this. Page 549 to 50, right at the end of the page and the start of the next one. Rand, you wool-headed idiot. Love the curses. Rand, you wool-headed idiot, she thought. Why can't you just once get yourself into some kind of trouble that doesn't force me to act like a heroine in a story? I just love it. I think this is just so telling about how Egwene sees herself in the scheme of things. It goes right along with my sort of idea that Rand and Egwene keep sort of, it's Rand will save Egwene and then Egwene feels like she needs to save Rand. So there's this connection there, this sense of they've got to look out for each other, more so than I think the other villagers have that, but it's just really clear between these two. And I just love this quote and the cursing. I love all the cursing. But yeah, She clearly sees herself saving the day over and over again, which is a big part, one of the reasons why she joined them in the first place. She felt that she needed to go. She wanted to see the world. It's the story that she's telling herself anyway. I absolutely love her at this stage. But it's sad that she's accepting that Rand probably won't or can't marry anyone. Like, I get where she's coming from and I can understand that. It's just a sad sort of thing. It's really difficult when you have to sort of move past whether they were in love or not is up for debate, I suppose, whether it's more than friendship. That's not really the debate. The point is that she had her future mapped out, that she was going to marry Rand at some point, whether that was soon or in the distant future, who knows. But they're both dealing with the fact that their future isn't going to look the way they always thought it would, and that can be really sad. Nynaeve suspects Min sees a lot more than they know or realise, and I believe that as well. I'd say that Min has learnt not to always tell people what she sees in her prophecies. And on Elayne, does Elayne notice things? Has Min worked any of this out, or does she not have the full picture, and we'll piece it together more as she goes? I'm really interested to get to know these other two more, Elayne and Min, and I'm really keen to see exactly what part they'll play in the bigger picture. Chapter 40, Domain. I knew I didn't trust Liandrin. Like, I just knew it, but I wasn't expecting that. Although I knew that I was expecting something to happen after they got out of the way, so I wasn't expecting this. She's obviously the Black Aja, which I did suspect, but glad I wasn't distrustful. I do wonder whether I'm just really distrustful of all characters, so I'm glad that I wasn't distrustful of Liandrin for no reason. I can't wait for Egwene to safely go nuts when she sees Pat and Fane again, and what that means. I think that could be a fun little moment. Sorry, I'm going to just say some of my notes in some of these sections are going to jump around a little bit because I am literally just writing down my thoughts, and I've noticed that it progressively has gotten more as the longer I'm writing these journals, the more difficult it can be for me to follow my train of thought. So sometimes I'm just gonna say something and then I'll move on to something else, and then I'll come back to it again. And anyway, you'll work that out as you go. It doesn't quite fit that Nynaeve went with Liandrin in the first place. She must be starting to let her guard down among the Aes Sedai a little bit for her to have trusted Liandrin enough to go with her, or all of Liandrin's talk of the Black Aja put her off guard a little bit. So I think Nynaeve is naturally suspicious of them, so maybe the reason is that Liandrin was playing into that suspicion a little bit, talking about the Black Aja. There's just something about this. I understand, and I know there was a little bit of talk in the comments in the last video about this. I get that Nynaeve is distrustful of Moraine, like that makes perfect sense. But for her to then, and I understand that the accepted and novices have to do what the other Aes Sedai say, it just doesn't fit that they would do something when they don't trust Liandrin. Like, this just doesn't seem to make sense. There's something about it that's not sitting right with me. Given, I can understand Egwene doing it. Egwene running off with Liandrin makes perfect sense. She's like as in the last chapter, she's the heroine in her own story. She's going to save Rand. That makes sense. Nynaeve going because Rand is in danger also makes sense. And because Egwene would go without her, maybe that's the reason. I just feel that she would leave some indication, but she doesn't trust anyone. I don't know exactly. I don't think I can put this into words exactly. It doesn't make sense that Nynaeve went with Liandrin in the first place. It makes sense that she went with Egwene to protect her, to protect Rand. Maybe that's the reasoning. Maybe I just have to accept that's the case. But anyway, that's more, yeah, I'm trying to figure out what was going on in Nynaeve's mind at that point, and that's the problem with these point of views, is you can't necessarily work things out unless you're getting into their point of view as well, and we haven't had as much of hers as I would like at times. But anyway, I'm going to just accept the fact that Nynaeve has gone with the group because she wanted to stay with Egwene. That's how I'm making it make sense in my head. And we'll go with that. I do think this experience that happened is going to change Egwene and have lasting repercussions. Hopefully it's not for the worse. I am really worried, and knowing that I've read a little ahead, I am really worried about the lasting repercussions on Egwene. But they better save her and Min. They better save both Egwene and Min before they get put on that ship. That is a concern. That is not the story I want for either of them. I do not want them on that ship and being taken over the seas where they are out of reach, because then they will be in a whole lot of trouble for a very long time. Funny how the pairings have worked out so far. Elayne and Egwene were the closer friends, or at least the most similar in this pairing. Nynaeve and Min have a little more natural suspicion about them, which makes sense that Min and Nynaeve worked out what was happening first. And that sort of, I think the fact that it's completely opposite to that pairing. So Nynaeve and Elayne now have to work together, and Egwene and Min have to be imprisoned together. I think it's a really interesting choice in that sense, and I'm very, very happy that we get to see the different dynamics that brings about in a different way. Does the Dark One want Nynaeve and Egwene simply because it'll weaken and distract Rand? Or is it that they are a bigger part in the prophecy than anyone has realised? And they will play a big part in who is going to win this big thing at the end. I think for a lot of it, the girls have been overlooked, and they're definitely going to be playing a part. We can see that they're going to be playing a part in their story. We wouldn't be focusing on them if they weren't. So I do wonder whether maybe they're not Tavern, but maybe they're so closely linked to them that their parts are just as important, and that's why the Dark One is trying to, I don't know, get rid of them, get them out of the way. Or maybe it is literally just a bit of a distraction on the Dark One's behalf, and it actually has nothing to do with the big part picture that they'll play, and they will still play a big part that will have an impact, but it's unexpected. I don't know. I think that's super curious. I'll be interested, as always. Really, really interested to see the role that they have to play in the bigger picture. Chapter 41, Disagreements. I hadn't thought about what the rest of the group had noticed about Rand using the portal stone. I just hadn't thought about it in the moment. It wasn't clear yet if any of them realise, but if any of them do realise, it's going to be Massima. Massima notices things and is watching Rand very closely. Is he going to work out who Rand is? Is he going to cause problems? I don't know, but yeah, I hadn't really thought about it. What do they think happened in that situation? Yeah, I think that would have been a really strange, scary experience with no explanation. Is it just because they were touching the portal stone and they thought that was just playing with magic that no one understood? Did they think Varen was involved? Did they think Rand was involved? I don't know. Just a question. I wonder what has Varen distracted. The alternate paths she could have taken, like through the 4 months that they were experiencing things. Did she experience things that have really sort of affected her, or is it sort of the domain, like these captured Aes Sedai? Is this distracting her? I think it could go anywhere. I'd really like to see a little bit more about Varen. There's something, as I think I've said before, something's not sitting right with me, and that could just be her personality. There's something going on there, and I'm really, really intrigued to see what it is, like to understand, and at some point I am going to understand, and I think it will all make a whole lot more sense, and I'm looking forward to that moment about who is Varen, like not who she is. I know, like, she's an Aes Sedai, she's of the Brown Asha, this all makes sense, but who is she? Like, I want to know more about her. She's intriguing. She has definitely got me thinking a lot, and I want to know more. Matt seems somewhat more okay with Rand than he was in the past. Maybe he's not quite okay, but more friendly than before. And Perrin is hanging in the background, not wanting attention on himself. And this has obviously had that 4 month, that the experiences they had, the alternate lives that they experienced, has had an impact, especially I think on Matt, but in a lesser way on Perrin, and I'll have to think about that. On a little side note, I'm really happy that I'm reading this back now, because I think I'm reframing a few things that I've written down in The Dragon Reborn based on maybe this. I think I'll have to have a think about that when I'm going through my next videos. Now, is the Dark One feeling Rand out, taunting him, simply keeping track of him and reminding him of everything? His appearance here doesn't particularly have a purpose as far as I can see, at least not a clear one. I'm sure there is a purpose, unless it's literally just to try and convince Rand to join him. I don't know. Egwene or his other friends are probably the only thing that could tempt him to that, though. I think that's probably the closest thing that would tempt Rand to joining the Dark One, is if it was the only option in regards to his friends, because he has that loyalty to them. But I don't even know if that would. I don't know. I don't think there's anything that would tempt him there as such. I love Lowell and his books. It's not hard to imagine someone caring about them staying dry, but I think that's just a beautiful image. Anytime Lowell and his books are sort of are written about, I love it. A giant Ogier caring for tiny human books and treating them as precious, and I love the little books in big hands. How cute. Again, I'm really hoping that we see some of these things in the TV show, because I just think that they're important elements to include. Just little, they're not integral to the big story, but they're important, and I'm looking forward to, I want to see Lowell. Why haven't we seen Lowell yet? Anyway, off on a little bit of a tangent there. Chapter 42, Falm. Gwen's situation feels hopeless. She better not end up sailing away. I'm really, really worried about what's going to happen to her. That will not do. She better not end up sailing away. That will not do. Sometimes I amuse myself with my writing. Min is doing better at adapting than I thought she'd do. I'd like to know more about Min's backstory. I think that would tell us why she's so good at adapting to this and all that. She does come across as strangely naive, but that could actually be because of what she sees rather than being naive. Again, Min is just one of those characters that I think will make more sense once we get to see more of her, I hope, anyway. We're only seeing her through the eyes of others, and she's got this strange ability that I think puts them on, not on edge, but there's that question about how people interact with her a little bit, I think. So I'm looking forward to actually getting to know her a little bit more in a bigger sense. I assume she'll be around in future books. I kind of know she's going to be around in future books. Spoilers. I'm not going to go there. I know she's going to be around. I just don't know exactly what her role is yet. I know enough. Nynaeve will be learning patience in her frustration. that should be really beneficial for her to help control the source and her anger, and maybe she'll learn more out of this situation than I had originally anticipated. She'll also have that sort of she stepped back into that needing to rescue, like she stepped out in the eye of the world. She left the village because she needed to rescue her villagers, and I think there's that same situation, so we're seeing that sort of same side of Nynaeve, and I'd say that will continue, that she will continue to do things to save her villagers, because no matter where they go, no matter what happens, this group will always be hers, and I think it would take a lot for her to let go of that. Elayne's privilege is showing through in her lack of understanding as to how the farm people are not resisting the Ascension. She came along for an adventure in this situation, completely opposite to all of the villagers, except maybe Egwene. So they all came along on the entire trip right at the start of Eye of the World because they had to, for various reasons. The three boys, because Moraine was making them leave, they had to leave or they'd end up dead. And Egwene followed them because she wanted adventure, so Elayne and Egwene have that same thing in common there. Nynaeve followed because she felt responsible and had to go and bring them home. So there's that sort of, there's the link between Egwene and Elayne, but also I think this is going to be a huge learning experience, and the more that Elayne spends time out with the villagers who have come from an incredibly different background to Elayne, she has come from such privilege in knowing her place and knowing her role in society and what her future looks like, and now experiencing this and actually getting to see what real people live like in at least this area. It must be a real shock for Elayne to find out how the real world operates. She's clearly resourceful and intelligent, but I'm yet to see leadership from her, and she'll really need to lead. So this could be an opportunity for her to lead, to learn leadership, or this could just be the starting point where we see her develop these skills along the course of the books. Farm as a town mustn't be very small. I think I'd imagined it to be a lot smaller than it must be if they're able to blend in as much as they are. So I was almost thinking small fishing village, small town, maybe not village, but not a large town, but it's obviously at least a large town, not a small town, because they were able to blend in so well. I really love reading about all the detail provided about the domain. I don't love it, sorry, I should say. I don't love any of the detail. I think it's quite horrific, but the world building in this this chapter and in this situation is epic. It's so sad about the broken Aes Sedai, like it's devastating. You can feel how much that is affecting Egwene and how easily she could break in this, and I'm really concerned about what that will mean for her. It's just, there's so much emotion in here, so much to worry about as well. Yeah, I just think it's really great world building, and it expands the world from beyond, really into this whole different understanding, where in the villagers' world, the Aes Sedai are to be feared. In the Ascension's world, they're to be put down, and they're a risk, and it's not that dissimilar a place in feelings about the Aes Sedai that these come from. It's just the power dynamic is completely different, and it's just really great world building, really great insight into cultural differences, and yeah, really, really great work. Chapter 43, A Plan. I'm so happy Captain Domin has made another appearance. I get excited every time I see him. I really hope this plan works, and maybe they'll rescue the other two Aes Sedai as well. And that could then give them extra support later on, not in this book, but in later books potentially, where they'll have some Aes Sedai who might become their allies potentially. Min's reading of the two, Nynaeve's makes sense. She's linked to Lan, which we can see, and we know Moiraine can hand the bond over, so that is a nice thing. As I had said earlier, I was worried that that was going to be problematic, but it's not going to be problematic provided Moiraine hands the bond over. But Elayne's makes less sense. A red hot iron and an axe. I don't know what that could mean. Perrin carries an axe. Is that related? Does that mean anything, or is it nothing to do with the boys at all? Is this a completely separate piece of information? And that, cool. Elayne's got some interesting things ahead of her, which I don't necessarily like the idea of a red hot iron. An axe could go either way. And going back a little bit, Egwene has connections to all the boys and Gallad. Min doesn't say anything about a connection with Nynaeve or Elayne though, and is that an oversight? Is it not important? Or is this something that I should remember? I think that this is very interesting to see that Egwene has these connections with Rand, with Mat, with Perrin, with Gallad, but nothing with Nynaeve or Elayne. And that could go either way. That could just be that Min didn't mention them. It could be that that they're not showing up, or the connection was so clear, or it could just mean that there's going to be some problems there at some point. I'm looking forward to seeing that one unfold as well. The Ascension as a whole are intriguing. They give Min near complete freedom, and it just like it makes sense for their culture, for what we know about them, but it just makes no sense. Like, it just seems like such an arrogant thing, which again makes sense culturally for what we know about the Ascension. They really don't suspect any trouble, and if there is, they think they can deal with it. So much arrogance in just this one action of letting Min almost walks around freely. And maybe Nynaeve will be able to release all the domain at the same time. And can you imagine the chaos of that if all of them were released in one go? I think that would be awesome, and that would be just an epic battle almost, because that, I feel that that's what would happen if the domain were released. The freed Aes Sedai would, you'd hope, they might be broken though, so that maybe they might not react out of fear. I don't know, but that could be a pretty epic scene to see. And the last chapter for today is chapter 44. 5 will ride forth, and that is an ominous chapter title. Is one of the 5 about to die? I don't think it can be one of the 3, Mat, Perrin or Rand, so that leaves Ingtar and Hurin. And have we gotten to know Hurin so much for him to die, so we've got an emotional connection with him? Or is it Ingtar, because Ingtar is so close to his dream of getting the horn? Are they going to kill Ingtar off? Or is Robert Jordan going to have Ingtar die before he gets to the horn so that the others can get there? And so much tension and, yeah, an ominous chapter title, to say the least. It was really good to be with Perrin again, even if just for a moment. Although it sounds like he'll be followed by white cloaks. It's all coming together, and yet what that means, I have no idea yet, but there's this constant connection between Perrin and the White Cloaks, and that the White Cloaks are obviously there for a reason, and that is going to be, it's going to be a difficult thing, I think, because the White Cloaks are human, and Perrin obviously has a connection with them. There's a line there between the two. It's easier to kill a Trolloc that is monstrous. It's easier to kill a Fade who is monstrous. It is a lot more difficult to kill a human who you know is doing things because they think that they're right. It's more difficult. So Perrin is already going to be in a little bit of a difficult position there if he comes up against them. Anyway, that's often a little bit of a tangent. Bernhold expects to die fighting the Ascension. It sounds like he's accepted the fact they can't win this without Aes Sedai help. The Domain have him rattled, and maybe he's questioning some of his deep-rooted beliefs. He's not convinced that Perrin is a dark friend either. Maybe they'll end up working together at some point. Maybe Bernhold will be that crossover that will connect the White Cloaks in with the Eamon's Five guys. I can't even call them good guys. I don't like the good team. And maybe they'll be allies at some point, or some of them will be because of Bernhold. And I'm interested to find out if the Questioners are being led by a dark friend, which is my first thought, or are they somehow allied to the Ascension? Why else would they be keeping the White Cloaks out of this? That doesn't make sense without there being something bigger happening there. So it's the Questioners in this sense. Going back to the prologue, I think there was definitely a White Cloak in the mix there, from what I can remember. Are they the leader? There's interesting things to think about in regards to the White Cloaks and who is actually controlling them and all those kind of big questions. So as you can see, lots of questions, lots of thoughts. I think with this one, there was a lot of questions that I know are going to be answered in the next lot of chapters, the last video. So that was a really great place. I think I didn't write down quite so many questions or thoughts because I knew that I was getting to the end, whereas earlier in the book I was writing down a lot more questions because I was like, I wanted to remember as I progressed, or as I read. I remember I read the last chunk within a day. It took me, it was a long day of reading and writing, but I read a lot, so I was able to keep up with what I was thinking and what I was doing in the moment. And it does affect, I've noticed, it does affect how many chapters I read at once as to kind of what I'm writing in the journal as well. So that's part of my experience as well. I'm keeping track of the dates that I'm writing things down and how long it is between, for example, that I haven't actually managed to read any. It's Wednesday today, and I haven't managed to read any of The Dragon Reborn. I've got 6 or 7 chapters left, and I've been sitting on it waiting to sit down and read it all at once. But at last read on Sunday, so that's a few days. So I do know that the next time I sit down and read, if I read them all in one chunk, it will go better. My journaling will be much more consistent, what I'm writing down. But also it will have a different feel to it as to what I was writing in the last couple of chapters, which I wrote in the evening before I went to bed. And it's interesting for me as well, reflecting on my experience of not just the words that I'm reading, but the experience, the physical experience I'm having reading this book as well. When have I been so invested in the story? Like for the last couple of chapters, I wanted to keep going. I had to force myself to put the book down. And it's been really difficult not picking it up. I'm looking at it now going, do I have to do this video? Yes, I'm going to do this video. It's just fascinating for me to really get into my reading experience and the way that I go about doing these things. I'm loving it. I'm hoping you're enjoying it too. I'd love if you got down in the comments and tell me what you thought about the Ascension. What is your favourite thing about them that I know so far? Are you as worried for these characters? When you first read the book, what was your reaction? How did you experience it? Challenge yourself. I challenge yourself to really go back to when you first read this. What was your reaction? Because again, a couple of weeks back, someone pointed out in the comments that when they, as an adult reading these books, they reacted in one way to the Eamon's Five, the villagers, and then reading it as a kid, they remember as a teenager, it made some of the decisions made a whole lot more sense as a teenager. So that's a really interesting thing to reflect back on, the experiences that we bring personally, can really impact how we experience and what we focus on and what we notice in these books. And I want to know about it. Tell me about it. And I look forward to continuing the conversation down in the comments below. So like the video and subscribe, and make sure you come back on Friday. Friday evening for me, but depending on where you are in the world, it could be a different time. For me right now, I'm filming this at 7:30 at night. I'll edit it and get it up before midnight. That's my goal. And on Friday, we'll do the same. I'd love to know, where are you in the world? Where are you watching this from? And how are you going with your Wheel of Time experience at this point? If you're reading it for the first time, if you're reliving it through my eyes right now, I want to know. I want to hear from you down in the comments. So get involved, and I will see you back on Friday for those that are interested in hearing my thoughts of the last few chapters of The Great Hunt.